Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of the Daily Mirror and The Sun, Pippa, Crerar and Harry Cole, both with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. So, to the front pages then, let's start with the Metro. Quotes from a blog by the former Prime Ministerial advisor Dominic Cummings, who insists he and other Downing Street staff would be prepared to swear under oath that Boris Johnson lied to Parliament about parties held at Number 10 during lockdown. Same story, The Guardian, with the headline, Cummings accuses PM of lying over Number 10 parties. It's also the big story for The Times. Their headline, Cummings, PM lied to Parliament about the party. And for the Mirror as well, a story from Pippa, PM gave the go-ahead for the party. The Eye reports that a number of Conservatives are anxious at the prospect of Mr Johnson remaining in office. The Express also focusing on the Prime Minister, but demands his attention on rising energy bills. The Financial Times understands the government is exploring the possibility of giving payments to energy firms whenever wholesale gas prices increase significantly in an attempt to cushion the impact on customers. British troops have arrived in Ukraine in a bid to stop a feared invasion from Russia. That's according to the Mail. Telegraph has word of sentencing reforms proposed by the government and aimed at clearing backlogs in courts. Well, The Sun leads with a story about Prince Andrew and his soft toys based on the testimony of a former royal police officer. And The Star has a story concerning the actor Brian Blessed. Well, just a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on your screen, well, you will be in a minute, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. There we go, there it is. So click on that and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. So let's join now Pippa, Crerar and Harry Cole. Welcome to both of you. Yet another day of headlines that Downing Street will be tuning out from, no doubt. Pippa, let's start with your paper. PM gave the go-ahead for the party. Why is this so important and significant?
Well, MPs came back to Westminster today after speaking to constituents over the weekend and also party activists, and we're comparing notes all day as to how bad the sort of Partygate row had gone down in the constituencies. There was a feeling last week that there was a huge amount of anger, and Number 10 was hoping that without any more revelations over the weekend, they'd be able to get back on the front foot and push ahead with this Operation Red Meat of populist announcements, things like the BBC licence fee and, as we'll be talking about later, channel migrants and bringing in the military to help stop so many people crossing. But that looked like it might be the case for a few hours. And then Dominic Cummings, once obviously Boris Johnson's closest advisor, and now probably his biggest foe, dropped another of his grenades when it comes to the Partygate row. You will remember this time last week, or sorry, not even this time last week, 5 days ago at Prime Minister's Question Time, Boris Johnson apologised after an email leaked about, sent from his senior civil servant in his office about the Bring Your Own Booze party in the Number 10 garden. And he didn't deny that he had been at it. He just claimed that he implicitly believed, his choice of words, that it was a work event rather than a social one, despite the fact that sources were saying that there was a table with lots of booze on it, his wife was there drinking alcohol, and some suggestion that he'd been warned about the event in advance. Number 10 categorically denied at the weekend claims by Dominic Lawson, the columnist in The Telegraph, that, it was Sunday Times, I think he was writing in, that two sources had in fact told the Prime Minister in advance that it was a party and it wasn't a good idea. And they denied that again this morning at the lobby that Harry and I were at, the Number 10 lobby. And then this afternoon, Dominic Cummings put out another of his now infamous blogs in which he claimed that two senior officials had indeed suggested to Martin Reynolds, the senior civil servant, that he should tell the Prime Minister that it wasn't a good idea, that Reynolds had said he'd go and check, and that the Prime Minister had allegedly said to go ahead with it. Cummings also claims that he himself warned the Prime Minister it wasn't a good idea, but got the brush off, and that Boris Johnson was keen to go to the garden regardless. All of this suggests...
And Pippa, the brush-off, just to quote the brush-off, Martin's invited the building to a drinks party. This is what I'm talking about. You've got to grip this madhouse. So where does that leave Boris then, Harry? Being told he's got to grip this madhouse and not doing it by the look of it.
Well, this is becoming a bit of a death match now. It's now he said versus he said, I suppose, with, as Pippa says, the aide turned rogue, turned nemesis. Now, the forcefulness of the denials from Number 10, both on the record, off the record, at lobby from the Prime Minister's spokesman, he's a civil service appointee. He will be toast if there is evidence that can back up Dom Cummings' versions of events. Now, there was a fear that that Dom Cummings would wait until Sue Gray had eventually, but will it be late this week or early next week, come back with her report into all of these parties, all these gatherings, these drinks going on, and then he would drop a load more allegations. It seems that Cummings has decided to wait, not to wait for that, and went for it at 5 o'clock. As Pippa said just a moment ago, there was a feeling today that lots of ministers came back. I've been sort of in the Commons since early this morning, speaking to lots of people, the tea room chats, the feeling that actually things weren't quite as bad as they thought they were going to be when MPs got back to their constituencies over the weekend. And there was a feeling actually, let's get on with this week, see how it goes. As long as there's no more revelations, the Prime Minister is in a slightly stronger position, I think, than he was before the weekend. Now, what this comes down to, though, is it is one person's word against another at the moment. I think if Dom Cummings had some sort of WhatsApp message or email proof that the Prime Minister had been told, then I think the Prime Minister would be in a very serious position now. He'd be almost, talks of game over if he's been proven to lie. But it is going to come down to his word versus Cummings. And Cummings is a man who has admitted that he wasn't entirely truthful about his own lockdown breaking with his infamous trip to Barnard Castle with his eyesight. And I think lots of MPs do not like Dominic Cummings. He is not seen as the sort of a neutral witness, so to speak, or indeed a particularly reliable witness. But it's clear he's not going to be going quietly, and he's got his eyes fixed on bringing down the Prime Minister, and he's going to keep saying it and keep punching that bruise until he gets his way.
Yes, the Metro too, I'll swear on oath that the PM lied to the House. We would never ask your sources, Pippa, for the range of stories that the Mirror has brought to the table on this one, but presumably Dominic Cummings, as you said, will not stop. Whether other people will join in too after the Sue Gray report, to see what was said to her is also possible. But some people suggesting, in reaction to this, the PM having to leave his job because he drank wine in his own garden, with or without work colleagues, because the May the 15th photograph we've got is him sat having wine and cheese with his, I think she was then fiancée, wasn't she, and their new baby, with work colleagues who'd just come out of a news conference. So, would that be some of the more bizarre ways of losing a Prime Minister?
Well, I think, go back to your first point. Obviously, I would never talk about my sources, but one thing I'm always quite intrigued by is the amount of people that say that this is a massive campaign orchestrated by Dominic Cummings. Clearly, he's played a huge role, but if anyone thinks that Dominic Cummings would talk to me after the Barnard Castle story, then I think they've got another thing coming. I think I've met the man once at Tory conference some time ago, pre the pandemic, and that's it. But yes, of course. I mean, actually, one of the sort of throwaway lines at the end of Dominic Cummings' blog this evening was that he believed that there were photos of other events later, some of the events that we reported on in the run-up to Christmas 2020 and so on, that was still to come out. And that sort of leads me to wonder whether he, in fact, has those, he'd left Number 10 at that point, but whether he had still people inside or contacts who have furnished him with those pictures, and that he's planning on getting them out there at some point. I mean, clearly that's the sort of thing that Number 10 will be very worried about. I don't think that the party that you mentioned, not the party, the gathering that you mentioned, which Number 10 has insisted was work. Dominic Cummings himself has said that it was work, sitting around in the garden with wine and cheese, and that was obviously the picture on the front of the Guardian. I don't think that will be the one to bring him down, if any of these indeed do bring him down. But the cumulative effect yes, there will have to be some sort of smoking gun about one particular incident, and the May 20th, 2021 at the moment looks the most likely. But don't forget that there are there are more than a dozen of these gatherings being investigated by Sue Gray. And ultimately, if the Prime Minister seem to have had disregard for the spirit of the rules as much as the rules themselves, then the public won't necessarily be very happy about that. And that anger will almost inevitably be passed on to their MPs, who are already feeling pretty febrile. And, then the Prime Minister's in a very dangerous position.
Yes, well, Tuesday's The Guardian does have the latest picture of Boris Johnson out with his pre-dawn run with his dog Dylan, does he not? But the Eye talks about the mood amongst Tory MPs. So my question was, as the Eye reports that the Conservatives have fallen 13 points behind, how is Boris Johnson doing with all of this? I mean, this is not what all Prime Ministers want. Is he taking phone calls from concerned Tory MPs? Has he got cabinet tomorrow? What will they be saying to him, Harry? What's the mood in Downing Street?
It's fairly funereal, I think, at the moment. Basically, government is slightly paralysed now until Sue Gray comes back with her report. It won't be a definitive, sort of guilty verdict or not, but it could be extremely uncomfortable reading if she makes it clear that she thinks that the rules were breached, or that, advice was ignored. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But by all accounts, the PM, speaking to sources, is flitting somewhere between optimism of saying, we've got to fight this, come on, let's crack on, let's fight back, let's keep the show on the road, and actually being fairly down in the dumps about the whole thing, and sort of waking up to quite how much trouble he's in. Look, it's going to be, he's been slightly hampered by the fact that family members come down with COVID. Obviously, the rules say you don't have to isolate, but it's recommended that you cut off all unnecessary contacts. So visits that you'd normally expect to see him having done in the last few days, visits to vaccine centres and schools, and the usual prime ministerial sort of post-COVID fodder that we've got so used to recently, hasn't been able to do. There's, I think we might see him tomorrow, but his next sort of public appointment in the diary is another round of six with Keir Starmer in the Commons chamber. And Cummings has handed him, the leader of the opposition, some fairly incendiary attack lines here. Now, look, it might not necessarily be the scandal, the original scandal that gets you. John Profumo didn't resign because he chased Christine Keeler around a swimming pool. He resigned because he lied knowingly and deliberately lied to the House of Commons. That is, I think, the benchmark for a lot of sensible, middle-of-the-road Tory MPs who are not rocking the ship now. Only 6 of them are calling for the Prime Minister to go at the moment, 1.5% of the elected Conservative Party. So there's a long way to go before that sort of inevitable tide of criticism becomes or he faces a confidence vote. But if he's found to have lied to the House, I think it's game over. But it's if there's a grey area over he said and she said, then this could rumble on for many weeks yet.
10 stays ahead, no doubt, for all there. Both of you stay there. Lots more to discuss, including is the number of migrants crossing the Channel is projected to double. What can be done to address the issue? What is the plan? Back with that in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole from the Mirror and the Sun, respectively. Welcome back to both of you. Harry, let's go to the Daily Telegraph. One of these elements that we were presented with over the weekend, apart from the BBC, was about migration. Lo and behold, here is Priti Patel in the Commons, suggesting the figure pulled out by the Telegraph here, that migrants could double. But, of course, this is all about defence as well and what to do about the journeys being made across.
Yes, well, the Operation Red Meat, as it's being called in the Sunday papers and firmly denied, like all great stories on Monday morning. But it's true, they are trying to chuck some policies out the door to try and move the news agenda on a little bit. Now, the problem with grabbing a policy off the shelf and announcing it before it's ready is it falls apart quite quickly. We've been sort of stress testing this one all day, that this idea that suddenly the Navy are going to be called in, this is what Tory MPs have been calling for, the MP for Dover particularly saying, send for the Navy to police the Channel to stop the small boats. The reality of the situation is, I think it's going to be a bit more like the vaccine task force or testing, where there'll be some brilliant, no doubt, naval officers who will be seconded to the Home Office to take control, get a bit of grip on the situation and take overall control of assets in the channel, rather than actually the idea we're going to see the aircraft carrier blocking off Dover and destroyers patrolling the shores. Because actually Border Force have the boats to do that. That is their job, that is their role, and the Navy probably don't really want any part of this, because actually, it's a real sort of hot potato now being shoved around Whitehall. If they can get a grip in terms of sort of more joined up thinking across government to stop this, fine. But I think it's been slightly overspun in a febrile climate to distract some woes.
Yes, Harry, I should have got you to talk about your paper, which is the sonic boom plot to stop the dinghies. Desperate Downing Street policy chiefs have explored using sonic weapons to repel small boats. Pippa, we've only got 30 seconds left. Quick thought from you, if you don't mind.
Well, it's a fascinating story about Harry. It's this idea that policy chiefs are looking at using sonic weapons, long-range acoustic devices, which they can then aim at small boats. It fires out a sort of a sonic, I don't know what the terminology is, but like a really intense sound, which can make people very ill and vomit. The idea being, presumably, that it will encourage them not to make the journey because they're likely to be met by this
Pippa?
awful sound and this awful feeling.